Welcome to the second in a series of videos I am creating to help educate you, the community, on the inner workings of our school district. In this video, we're going to be going through a document of which you can find in the link below this video, Policy Review. The first policy that we'll look at actually just outlines the role of the board and its dual responsibility as an agent of the state, as well as the responsibility to the community members of which elected us all to represent them on the board, to make sure that we are providing the public education for our students that we are charged with doing. The second one will walk you through the board member board of ethics. You can read through these on your own, and I just, once again, at the very last one, letter P, talks about that role as well. And we need to make sure we always recognize that. Then you have ethics, which obviously with our students, we expect a high standard of ethics in our community as they become citizens and move forward after school. Then you're going to look at the school board powers and responsibilities. The board should concern itself primarily with the board questions and policies rather than administrative details. The administrative details are left to the administrators, which makes sense. We're the overall in charge of the public schools. The one I want to highlight, that you see highlighted here, that I will be talked about in this video, is F. The school board approves the budget, the financial reports, audits, major expenditures, payment of obligations, and policies whereby the administration may formulate procedures, regulations, and other guides for the orderly accomplishment of business. The next one that you'll look at breaks down the subcommittees of the board. One you'll see here, Circle Community Relations Committee. We don't actually have in our district. And last year we paid someone over $25,000 to do this for us. Now you see in orange this BDE. This is the part that we referred to in an email in the document that you saw in the previous video. But highlighted in yellow, number 1 is Finance Committee has the authorization to bind the full board only by the committee members signing of the warrants. So this committee signs the warrants, approves the payments. That binds the board to those expenditures and the payment of those expenditures. Only committee that can bind the full board is the Finance Committee. The second highlighted piece here, you'll see the role of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee will supervise all district accounting. It will approve all district expenditures in accordance with the current legal requirements. It will perform such other duties as the Board of Directors may assign. Supervise all district accounting. Approve all district expenditures. So if you skip down to, you'll see the organizational chart, and what I'll point out here is you see the Board of Directors on top, as it should be. It's in charge of the whole district. Then you also see a line that goes down to the superintendent of schools, over and down to the school attorney, over and down to the architect, over and down to the auditor. Notice the line doesn't go from the superintendent of schools. Superintendent of schools line goes under these three and then down to the administrative assistant office manager, and also goes down through the business and education, goes down to assistant superintendent. So there is no line actually from the superintendent of schools or the assistant superintendent of schools or any other employee directly to the attorney, architect, and auditor. In our district, however, and we'll talk about this in later videos, in our district, the board of directors actually, even if requested, is not allowed to speak to school attorney, architect, or auditor without going first through the superintendent of schools and or the assistant superintendent of schools. Keep that in mind. Now as we come down to the next one, what I want to show you here is this is actually the process updated June 30th, 2016 for expenditure system. So when you think about the Finance Committee approves all district expenditures, also all district accounting. So you see the players that are in play here, and you'll see their names and their positions within the school. Now this is interesting. Notice who's missing. No board members, so the Finance Committee is not here. And as you read down through here, you can see that I've highlighted a couple of different areas, but really when you read down through here, the thing that would really become of interest to anybody kind of looking at this is the fact that you do not really see anybody from the board. Now you do see that after everything's all said and done, the Finance Committee does come in to sign the warrant. So the second to last paragraph, after each batch of payables is posted to create an AP warrant, the business clerk runs a report showing the current status of the budgetary warrant articles attached to the AP warrant signature page. AP warrants are run twice per week and are signed by the appropriate board members who visit the office to personally review the invoices. Now remember, we, the Finance Committee, approve all district expenditures, and we'll see later where, when we talk about treasurer, also approve the payments. In our district, That doesn't actually happen. Finance committee members come in weeks, maybe months after these purchases are made, the expenditures are gone, the checks are gone. Actually, and if you look at the emails previously in the meeting in which we actually talked about this and the need to bring our procedure, such as this, into line with our policies, the challenge was the board members, the finance committee, would have to come in twice a week to review these before the checks went out. Great. The next morning, I actually took carpool, drove my kids to school, showed up at the white building a little after 7:30. Batches 25, 26, and 27, 0 signatures, checks already gone. Here's a process, not even complying with the own process, of which is not compliant with the policies. My opinion, I'm not saying anything wrong here, I'm not accusing anybody, anything, just pointing out a fact of which happened. Batches 25, 26, and 27, no signatures, checks already gone. But historically, and being in finance myself, knowing that you have to leave a trail and document, you'll see that that is not unusual to not have the full board's approval of the finance committee before the checks leave the building. Hundreds of $1,000s leaving our district. Then you'll see DB, you can go through some of these policies on your own. Financial accounting and reporting, the finance committee and the board of directors shall receive a district financial statement at each meeting. Well, previous to becoming the chair of the finance committee in June, it actually took me a couple months to get a meeting together. This didn't occur. We didn't get regular updates. Go back and look at the minutes for the board meetings and see how many times the board actually get a finance report. You're going to find it's very little to none as we move on. Audit and financial monitoring, this will show you how this is supposed to work. And remember, the finance committee is supposed to supervise all district accounting. When it comes to the audit, the only real role that the finance committee plays, as you can see in the emails I had before, is when we sit down and have the audit presented to us. Any concerns we have about the audit, etc., what have you, can be talked about during that meeting. And then that audit is actually presented not by the auditors and not by the finance committee, but by the assistant superintendent who come out and will let you know just how superlative an audit it was. Remember in the emails, the audit might not actually cover exactly what everybody thinks. Now a question for any finance committee member is, what is the scope of that audit? Without turning to anybody that works in our school district, what is the scope of this audit? Now we also have the purchasing here and talk about the different bids. Now when you think about all the contractors and vendors we have, go back and look through the minutes of the finance committee and go back and look through the minutes of the board committee. See how many of these you see over the past 2, 3, 4 years actually come through and be approved appropriately as they should be. Come to expense authorization reimbursements. Employees and board members of the district may be reimbursed for pre-authorized transportation, lodging, meals, and expenses associated with school business. Now once again, pre-authorized. Now remember, the finance committee approves all the district expenditures. Now when you look at perhaps in our district, and we'll see this in a later video when we go over some of the handling of our finances, you will see that oftentimes we spend thousands of dollars on travel, hotel stays, food, without any pre-authorization except for from the employees of our district. A little bit of a lack of control there from a finance committee. We also talked about conflicts of interest, and I'll let you go ahead and read that one, make your own assumptions. Purchasing procedures and quality control is pretty straightforward. Petty cash accounts, when you think about district accounting. Does anybody know how much money is in each one of these petty cash accounts? Does anybody know where these are stored within each one of the buildings? Does anybody know or seen how this is spent or any type of receipts? Has anybody on the board of directors, could anybody tell you how much we spent out of petty cash last year? How many times these accounts were refilled and what these accounts were used for? That'd be a great question. As a finance committee member for over a year, I could not answer that one for you. Purchasing authority. All purchases of goods and services and equipment for which the district will be responsible for payment, except purchases made under approved petty cash funds, must be made on official purchase orders, properly approved and executed. Properly approved and executed. Okay, remember what we talked about before when you read through that one. Cash in school buildings. Here it's pretty straightforward. I have a star next to this because I could not tell you anything about this one, how that one actually works. Business management goals and objectives. The board of directors looks upon business operations school system as essential, auxiliary to the central function of the school system, which is education. The board serves as a trustee of school facilities, overseer of school business operations for the purpose of providing the facilities and the service that will support a good educational program. Efficient and business-like procedures for fiscal accounting, purchasing, and management of equipment and supplies are established. Thorough, effective, and economical maintenance program that will assure a useful life of school sites, plants, and equipment. We'll come back to this when we talk about the building committee and the projects that we have outstanding, etc. But when you think about this, really, once again, what's the role of the board, and is the board actually fulfilling that role? When you think about, we're the trustee of the school facilities, overseer of the school business operations. School board policy process, one of the things that came up previously is that, well, we should just change the policies to match our behavior. Well, that's not really how it works. When you think about school board policy process, there's a process in place for that, and you can read through that one on your own. And we also have policy adoption. How do the policies become adopted? It's very public. It's a very public process, so you would all know, hey, we're going to be changing our policies around fiscal management because our behavior isn't actually aligning with the policies. Policy revision and review, in an effort to keep policies up to date, they will be reviewed on a regular basis. So if any of these policies were to be changed, it would be reviewed and come through that public policy once again, or process. And then we also go through policy implementation, but you'll see that I have here in yellow, continuous disregard for board policy and regulations may be interpreted as willful neglect of duty and may contribute grounds for dismissal. They constitute grounds for dismissal, continuous disregard for board policy and regulation. At a public meeting, I asked if everybody knows what the policies are. Do we test for the policies? The answer came back no. So the assumption is if you work here, you know the policies. If you're outside of the policies, you are held to this standard. Policy implementation, CH. But are we? I think you can see that we have a little bit of a issue with compliance with our policies in our district. Board review of regulations. So we think about the regulation that I put forward to the process there, the June 30th, 2016. Reading through these policies, you'd think that this would come up through the policy committee, or it'd be first go to the finance committee, which would go to the policy committee, go to the board to approve that we're going to have this process that is non-compliant with our policy. But go back and look at the minutes of our board meetings and finance committee meetings. Development of regulations, this one's pretty clear too. Basic instructional program, that will come in later. Curriculum development, that will come in later when it comes to the cost of our doing business. Curriculum adoption, that will come in as well. Textbook selection and adoption, you'll see here that the board approves the curriculum and the textbook adoption. In my experience, the changes that we had in our curriculum in my time on the board, as well as the textbook changes, were never approved. We were told they were happening, but we never had a chance to discuss and or approve that adoption. So took that out of our hands. Evaluation of administrative staff, you see each year, I think it's in May or June, to come out and talk about the raises for our different administrators. And you'll see here, this is supposed to be done in conjunction with the board. So you think a board member would know what the assistant superintendent or anybody else in any other administrator is being goaled upon. We know what our principals are goaled upon. So if we had a principal out there that we thought did really well, and they're the goals, and we see on the evaluation, we'd be able to see that. In our district, once again, that does not happen. I would be remiss if I told you, or I'd be misleading if I told you I have any idea what any of the goals for any of our administrators are, except for our including our superintendent, and we'll get to that later. But because there is no annual goal presentation and the annual goals are not developed, I'm not really sure what they're measured on, but that'd be a question that you may be able to ask any current member, as I was never able to get that answer. Public's right to know, outline how you get information from the board. Community involvement in decision making, as you can probably understand, especially as we went through teacher negotiations last year. Community was very vocal, very vocal. Did you feel like you were heard? School district goals and objectives, once again, it talks about here, as I was saying before, goals are established and evaluated annually through a variety of means, including but not limited to the strategic plan, of which, if you remember me talking about the last strategic planning meeting that I went to, which was a public meeting held at the Bacon Tree. Nothing against the Bacon Tree. Very swank type environment. Great food. I think the average ticket price is $20 to $25 per plate. Think about all the administrators and board members that were there. Talk about the strategic plan. Actually, on our strategic plan, and we'll talk about this later, you get a green if you made progress. So if you had a goal set in 2013 that was supposed to be accomplished in 2014, but at the end of 2016 you had made some progress, you get credit as green. Maybe that's how we measure performance here. I'm not really sure. In my world, it doesn't really match up. We actually use metrics and goals. When it talks about board and superintendent relationships, the board holds the superintendent responsible for carrying out its policies within established guidelines and for keeping the board informed about school operation. The board holds the superintendent responsible for carrying out its policies within established guidelines. Remember the process that we talked about earlier. Superintendent is also responsible for the management of the schools under the board policies and accountable to the board. A board member is not accountable to the superintendent. Superintendent is accountable to the board. Not one board member, to the board. Also, the delegation of power or duty, however, shall not relieve the superintendent responsibility for the action taken under such delegation. This will become important in our next video when we go over a few examples of addition and subtraction. Appointed board officials, secretary, superintendent of schools shall serve as secretary of the board. Duties of secretary shall include keep a full and accurate record of proceedings of all board meetings. Go back and look through the meetings. Once again, as you saw in my document before, questions were raised about a particular piece of information not being included in the meetings, maybe such as votes that were taken not being in the meeting. So if it's not, I'm not sure how we decide what goes in the meeting minutes and what doesn't, but I raised my concerns on a number of occasions, but apparently fell on deaf ears. Once again, the reason why I'm now, again, a private citizen who is just leveraging his First Amendment right to educate you all on what happens within our district. Board treasurer. Superintendent of schools shall serve as the treasurer of the district. Treasurer shall be the official custodian of all funds of the district, shall be responsible for the proper safeguarding and accounting of all such funds. Duties of the treasurer shall include the following. Notice I've highlighted number 2. Issue warrants for the payment of expenses lawfully incurred on behalf of the district following approval by the finance committee of the board. Following. So I'd ask you, if checks are leaving the building without any signatures from the board or without all of the signatures required for approval, I'll let you come to your own conclusion. The people in their school district, you all own the schools. If the board or any employee working in business, our budget each year is about $30 million. They call that revenue, apparently in our district. They call it revenue. I call it taxpayer money for the most part, but they call it revenue. 5 times revenue would be $150 million. If we want to run this like a private institution and not really worry about us as a public, by all means, I'm sure we'd all accept a check for $150 million. And we'd probably go build ourselves another public school system. Administration absence of policy, that's come up at a couple meetings and why I included that one in there. A friend of mine brought it up and that was there. So once again, go through the policies. You can follow, if you followed along while I was going through the video, down below you will see the link to this document. I've also included a couple other links. One is to the agenda and packet for actually tonight. So a lot of you might not be able to make it there, but if you look at the packet, especially the last 4 pages, you'll see that the Town Council's Finance Committee is actually going to be discussing a few items about the warrants that are coming up. And I've also included a couple of links about other school districts that may have fallen outside of their policies. And so you can read up about that as well. Once again, I really appreciate you joining, your interest and your engagement. And once again, my goal as a private citizen is just to educate you on what I know about the inner workings of our district so you all can make the best decisions, especially now as we go through our budget process, of which I think Wednesday night the board will be looking to stamp that one too. Now, full disclosure and transparency, I will not be at any board meetings probably in the near future. Not to make this a topic, but due to ongoing health-related issues, the environment would not be consistent with my recommendation of how to proceed. Once again, not to make that an issue, but I just want to be fully transparent of why you will not see me at these board meetings. Once again, thank you for joining, and look forward to the next video.